Veterans Club started very organically. There was a season where Jeremy was losing a lot of brothers. There was no sisters at this moment, but there were a lot of brothers to suicide, and it was really affecting him in a negative way. And he really understood that it was that lack of connection, the camaraderie that they had. You know, often when our veterans transition out of the military, it's really hard, but they all go back to their home state. So it's not like everybody's in the same area that you can still continue. Now social media, you know, kind of gives us a little bit of connection there. But so we just started a Facebook page. That's all it was, Facebook page, hoping to get some, you know, folks together for breakfast at Cracker Barrel. You know, there was no grand plan for a nonprofit, but the need was there. And it grew. We believe, you know, that it was of God's doing. It wasn't ours. You know, Jeremy has said himself, it wasn't anything that he did, but there was a need, and it grew.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us once again on the State of Freedom.
The State of Freedom is a listener-supported podcast. We're committed to pursuing the truth about policymaking, decisions, and situations in Louisiana and at the national level that stand to impact our freedoms.
Please become a monthly supporter of the State of Freedom at freedomstate.us as we continue to expand the voice of liberty across Louisiana and beyond.
Good morning, everyone. It's so good to be with you today. Joining us today as a guest on the State of Freedom is Erin Harrell, the beautiful wife of Jeremy Harrell, who we had on our show about 6 weeks ago now. His interview, if you missed it, was episode number 263, and he is a veteran who's wrongly imprisoned. He was gone after by the DOJ for volunteering and helping other people. It's completely insane. So we're bringing Erin on today to talk about how Jeremy's doing, to give us an update on the case, and we're really looking forward to that. But Erin is a change agent and a force for good in her own right. She's a co-founder with Jeremy of the Veterans Club, Inc., a nonprofit dedicated to providing connection, healing, recovery, housing assistance, and vocational training to veterans and first responders. She also serves as a clinical therapist for addiction recovery care, specializing in individual and group therapy, mental health assessments, and interprofessional collaboration to ensure high-quality patient care. And the scripture of the day, if y'all want to read along with me today, if you're sitting and can read along with me, I left my Bible on the other side of the room, so I'm going to have to read it from the screen today. But it's Galatians chapter 3, verses 23 to 25, and it says, "So until the revelation of faith for salvation was released, the law was a jailer, holding us as prisoners under lock and key until the faith which was destined to be revealed would set us free. The law was our guardian until Christ came, so that we would be saved by faith. But now that faith has come, we are no longer under the guardian of the law." And that's a hard one to read this morning, but I think the Lord brought me to it for a reason. You know, faith sets us free from the condemnation of the law. And when Paul was writing this to the Galatians, the law he spoke of was far more than the 10 Commandments that we think of in Jewish law. There were hundreds upon hundreds of man-made, unjust, impossible to follow religious laws that the Jews were expected to keep. Someone told me not long ago, when we were discussing the reality of Marxism in American society today, that because of the way our government system has been operating, we as innocent and hardworking citizens could be found guilty of committing any number of federal crimes any hour of the day if the government sets us in its crosshairs. He said that we were living in the reality of that idea spoken by the Soviet police chief, Lavrentiy Beria, who said, "Show me the man and I'll give you the case against him." And we know that to be the case with Jeremy Harrell, with the J6ers, with Tina Peters, and many other wrongfully imprisoned innocent ones. The same was true in the spiritual sense of the Jewish law at this time when Paul was speaking it to the Galatians. So what Paul was saying is that the religious rules that had been so burdensome that people were completely trapped in condemnation no matter what they did. But Jesus changed all of that. And Paul explains that putting our faith in Jesus' perfect sacrifice to save us through his death and resurrection releases into us true freedom. Our faith in Jesus is the only way to be unchained from the condemnation of our sins, because we're all guilty of sin. And this passage struck me so powerfully this morning, Aaron, specifically, because I know Jeremy was wrongfully prosecuted and he's now sitting in prison, having committed no crime. But because the condemnation-seeking, quote-unquote, law determined his guilt. But the scripture shows us that something more powerful than unjust law is true in his life. His freedom is derived from a higher source, Jesus. So while he may be jailed physically, the liberty of his soul is one thing that no prosecutor, judge on earth can take away. And thank God for that. I know that's where he's deriving his strength.
Yes.
So powerful, Danielle. And when I think about, in thinking about the scripture that you read today, Paul, Galatians, there is no one who more perfectly exemplifies the injustice that occurs through a technical application of the law and no other consideration. And I think it's very important, before I introduce Erin Harrell, Jeremy's wife, that I set this up appropriately. Jeremy is a combat veteran, highly decorated combat veteran. He was in Iraq. He served his country and sacrificed greatly for his country. When he left the military, he saw and noticed that there were these horrible problems being experienced by former warriors, guys who were deeply scarred by their experience in combat. And Jeremy was one of them, diagnosed with complex PTSD, which is a very debilitating condition related to his wartime experience. Originally, as Jeremy told us when he was on the show, he actually worked with the VA to try to get timely and effective, meaningful help for all of these soldiers who needed it so desperately. And then Jeremy realized that the VA was really not effective, was really not doing what they were charged to do. So Jeremy begins his own nonprofit, Veterans Club, Inc., made it very successful. And I don't even know, Aaron can talk about this, the number of people that have been touched and soldiers who have been healed and helped through Veterans Club, Inc. is probably many, many. So Jeremy built this organization up. And interestingly, while Jeremy was the face of the organization, all of his work was purely voluntary. He never paid himself one dime out of the organization. While he was doing his volunteer work for his organization, he was also getting disability benefits from the government. And Jeremy had said, this is my therapy. This is part of my therapy, this volunteer work for my PTSD. Well, the VA decides if you can volunteer 40 or 50 hours a week, then you can work and you shouldn't be receiving disability benefits. So they go back retroactively about 3 years, penalize him for all the disability benefits that he had received. And then ultimately he gets prosecuted by the Biden DOJ for theft of government benefits. This is a guy who has done nothing but good for others, despite his own personal torment that I'm sure Aaron knows only too much about. Ultimately, he's convicted of theft of government benefits, and now he is just completing, he's in his first month of a 6-month jail sentence for a federal felony conviction, when he did nothing except provide a service from his heart to people who need it, when our antiquated, incompetent, bloated government was not doing its job. That's what occurred here, and that is why this is such a gross miscarriage of justice. Aaron, I'm sorry that I to delay introducing you here, but I had to get that out because I want our listeners to understand exactly why this is so important. Welcome to the State of Freedom.
Thank you for having me.
How is Jeremy doing right now?
My husband is an amazing man, and he is adapting to his environment. Yesterday was his birthday. As we were talking before we started, I made note that he spent his 21st birthday working in an Iraqi prison while in service, and he spent his 44th birthday serving a sentence in a federal prison. And it was hard yesterday. It was really hard. I did get to talk to him on the phone. I could hear it in his voice. It was hard, but he is staying in the Word. God is with him. He is seeing him every day there. He's been very moved by the generosity of other inmates there. Interestingly enough, we are very grateful for that. So he is staying strong, through his faith, and just ready to come home.
Yeah, absolutely.
We are so honored to be affiliate partners for General Michael Flynn's movie, Flynn, Deliver the Truth, Whatever the Cost. Support General Flynn and the State of Freedom by shopping the Flynn Movie Store directly from the button on our homepage at freedomstate.us or through our affiliate link, flynnmovie.com/TSOF podcast. On that site, you can purchase the DVD, which comes with a streaming link. You can pick up Flynn movie merchandise and get his complete 5GW book series.
Erin, would you tell us a little bit about anything Chris may not have been able to cover in his introduction about what landed Jeremy where he is today and maybe what got it, the events that led up to today?
Sure. Veterans Club started very organically. There was a season where Jeremy was losing a lot of brothers. There was no sisters at this moment, but there were a lot of brothers to suicide, and it was really affecting him in a negative way. And he really understood that it was that lack of connection, camaraderie that they had. Often when our veterans transition out of the military, it's really hard, but they all go back to their home state. So it's not like everybody's in the same area that you can still continue. Now, social media, kind of gives us a little bit of connection there, but
Not the same thing.
so we just started a Facebook page. That's all it was. Facebook page, hoping to get some, folks together for breakfast at Cracker Barrel. There was no grand plan for a nonprofit. But the need was there and it grew. We believe, that it was of God's doing. It wasn't ours. Jeremy has said himself, it wasn't anything that he did, but there was a need and it grew. In January of 2019 is when we did officially file the IRS, paperwork to become a 501c3. People did want to donate, and we didn't want to accept donations not being a legitimate organization in that way with the IRS. So much to our chagrin, we did become a nonprofit. And again, the need was there in the community and it just grew. And anytime somebody came to us, Jeremy is the face of the organization. He really has a gift of speech. We try to let people know that just because you have a mental health diagnosis or, struggle with that, it's not an intellectual disability. And, Jeremy he was able to speak his heart. It resonated with people. They were drawn to the organization. The Facebook page just grew and grew and grew. There became about 6,000 local veterans in the private Facebook page. Somebody came to us with an idea of something that they thought would bring connection and community to veterans and their families. As a spouse, I was passionate about the family aspect. Yeah. We would try to implement it, and that is how the programming grew, honestly, just very organically. We never really sat down and said, let's do Jeeps, let's do horses, it was just people saying, hey, horses are cool, kind of not my jam. What about Jeeps?
Yeah. And Jeremy's, I'm really tired of watching my brothers die. That's how it started.
Absolutely. Because we know that isolation is a killer. COVID taught us that. People isolated, they mistook social distancing for social isolation. And we've had quite a terrible repercussion from that. But yeah, that is just really kind of how it started and grew.
And you were already, and I can assure you, Erin, nothing scares the government more than effectiveness. Nothing scares the government more than success. Nothing scares the government more than when an organization actually achieves meaningful objectives and measurable progress. The government hates that because our government is a government, and hopefully that's changing, of substantial mediocrity.
Mhm.
And obviously the way you're describing, the organization, that is exactly the opposite of what was going on there. It sounds to me like it was just an excellent instrument of healing for people these soldiers who deeply needed it, including Jeremy, like I said in the outset, including your husband.
All of this was his therapy. I said to somebody the other day who was like, but he volunteered all these hours, which he may have spoken to about that number of hours on the show before. But, I said, trying to unravel what was volunteer work, what was, therapy would be like trying to unravel your plate of spaghetti. It was a lifestyle. It was a lifestyle. And frankly, it kept him on this side of the dirt.
Yeah.
It really did. Being with his brothers and sisters, we love horses. So being with horses, working on the Jeeps, just meeting for coffee. I can't tell you how many calls he would take at any point of the night. He left our family on Easter to go be with a veteran who was suicidal. And we're like, go. This is what God calls us to do, even on Easter, right? And it was therapy to him. And we unfortunately saw a real big backslide in that once he was indicted and was no longer allowed to engage in any of those activities.
Is part of the reason, Erin, I want to confirm this, because Jeremy had indicated that, look, the condition of the Veterans Administration under President Biden, and I know soldiers who have endured great frustration in trying to secure benefits from the VA, try to get the help that they need, the plethora of bureaucracy that exists there. It's a nightmare, can be a nightmare. Was that also one of the motivating factors for the nonprofit, so that the soldiers could get good relief and without having to go through this Kafkaesque bureaucracy of the federal government?
Absolutely. Again, it started so naturally and organically, I think, out of that, reason that you just said, because, you call the VA and you get shifted from this number to this person and that, number and that person. And maybe you get a mental health appointment a month or 2 or 3 down the road. I think that they did, they have a policy if it's not within 30 days, but they work around that. I'll tell you that. And so, folks need immediate support.
Yeah.
And what we have learned, again, when we talk about government, veterans are a very security-minded population. And they're not going to always disclose really the things that they need to talk about to the government. And what we've learned through this, and what has been really heartbreaking for me I'm a clinician, I'm really blessed to work at an agency that allows me to operate from my faith. So I had an opportunity to work for the VA, and I'm really glad that I did not take that opportunity, because that would be awkward.
Yeah.
But, what we learned, one of the things we learned through this trial is that the VA will use your private mental health and medical documentation and put it out there to the public. That was one of the things that was really hard when we got the discovery for the trial, is we saw that the VA OIG, Remington Schilling, was actually showing witnesses Jeremy's statements in VA mental health appointments. That transcripts, like notes that the VA psychologist had written in their, appointments together. He was actually showing that to these witnesses and asking them what they thought about that.
Let me clarify this. This administrator was showing these witnesses Jeremy's statements before there was any formal indictment, before there was any formal criminal charges filed against Jeremy?
Correct.
Okay. Which is absolutely a violation of HIPAA. Once you file a formal criminal indictment or a civil lawsuit, at that point, you are allowed, within the context of a case, usually within the context of a protective order, to show witnesses various items of evidence. But if this was occurring before there was any formal engagement on the part of the government, that's illegal. They shouldn't have been doing that.
We know the government.
Yeah. No limitations on the amount of violations they're willing to make against people's privacy and personal rights. Erin, what do you think was behind this? Why was he targeted?
Well, we know who made the first call. And I think it became one of these things where, so Chris, you talked about, the government does not like when something effective starts to occur, right? And that would be like what we would call like a macro type, environment setting.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, on a micro type setting, there was a lot of local nonprofits who seemed to become very displeased at the progress that Veterans Club was making. In short, and I hate to even speak to it because my brain doesn't operate that way. I want to see everybody succeed. And if you're doing the thing that God's called you to do, or you're serving the homeless or whatever, like, I'm your champion. But there became a lot of jealousy with local VSOs because Veterans Club and because of Jeremy, because the model, if you will, from a clinical standpoint, right? Because it was working and because veterans were gravitating towards it. Now, Interestingly enough, Veterans Club has always supported these other organizations. We all do a little bit of something different. So that's how you come together and work. But what we found out was that the investigation initially started in October of 2021 with a phone call to the VA OIG. And that phone call was made by a Mr. Perry Cook, who actually was a VA employee. He was a veteran service representative for the VA. He also runs a nonprofit, Mark 12 Ministries, as a matter of fact, and also calls himself a pastor.
Wow.
And so he made this call, and the discovery reveals that his complaint was that Jeremy was stealing money from the organization. Now, once they dug into the organization, they had a forensic accountant go through our own, we didn't know it at the time though, like our own, banking, Veterans Club's banking, not a hair out of place, because we didn't accept money. This was our mission. God called us to do it. We were provided for, that was just kind of our perspective. But I know that this Mr. Cook had a real personal problem with Jeremy, and that's revealed as Veterans Club became more successful. As Jeremy started to get more attention as the front-facing figure of Veterans Club. We have a Facebook group, a private Facebook group, and Mr. Cook had wanted to post a lot of things in this group that were just against the group policy, of kind of advertisement, things of that nature. And there's messages from him to Jeremy, just showing his real displeasure and not being able to post. I mean, it's so petty. It's so.
Was Perry Cook was this guy an employee of the VA when he made this call?
I don't think he was an employee of the VA.
But he was certainly a former employee.
He was. Which, let's be honest. If you're an employee of the VA, you have access to someone's records. I don't know how else anyone would know exactly how Jeremy's VA benefits were defined.
Yeah.
That wasn't, that's kind of private information. For any veterans listening out there, I don't suggest that you talk about how your, VA benefits are. VA benefits are different. Social Security, you're either disabled or not. VA benefits, there's different aspects, percentages, and things of that nature. And so I just think it's really, odd because he did speak to the specifics of Jeremy's VA benefits in his initial call. But yeah, so, that complaint was made in October of 21. Now, interesting. On the stand, and this will be revealed in the transcripts of the trial, the OIG investigator stated that his investigation did not start until December of 22. So I thought it was very strange, and I can't really imagine that he would get the year wrong and also the month, but that he would say to the trial that his investigation started so much later than it actually did. So that was something that really bothered me, and that it seemed nobody picked up on, especially once the psychologist got on the stand and testified that her CMP exam occurred in September of 22, which was earlier than this date the investigator said. So there was just a lot of problems with the trial. And that was real hard to sit through just to listen to the lies that were being told.
Yeah.
can't really, imagine that he would get the year wrong and also the month, but that he would say to the jury that his trial, that his investigation started so much later than it actually did. So that was something that really bothered me, and that it seemed nobody picked up on, especially once the psychologist got on the stand and testified that her CMP exam occurred in September of 22. Which was earlier than this date, the investigator said. So there was just a lot of problems with the trial. And that was real hard to sit through just to listen to the lies that were being told.
Erin, what was there ever a point here? Okay, so you have this situation where Jeremy is being investigated, by OIG. Is that what it is?
Yeah, the VA OIG.
Okay, the VA OIG. So he's being administratively investigated. There's no criminal indictment at this point or any federal criminal investigation. Was there ever any point to your knowledge where they said, because I'm thinking if I'm in this situation and I have one modicum of human decency within me, I'm going to look at Jeremy and say, okay, this is a decorated combat veteran. This is a guy who would have died for his country, married, children. And this is a guy who's volunteering hours, 40, 50, 60 hours a week, making no money, but volunteering to try to keep warriors alive and to give them the resources that they need to recover their shattered lives. And he's doing it all for free. Everything that he makes is going straight into the organization. Why couldn't they have looked at that and then say, you know what, Jeremy, here's what we're going to do. You've been receiving these benefits for, 2 or 3 years now. What can we do to try to resolve this and work this out or whatever, without ever letting it get to the point of him being criminally indicted and sitting in a jail cell? That's another thing that I find absolutely reprehensible, is why this was ever allowed to get to that point.
A good question, Chris. And I think it really goes back to, honestly, like pride and ego. I think that, this case started in just a petty, jealous way of somebody who has a nonprofit that says he's a godly man. I think really just being intimidated by Jeremy and his true heart. And then, like I said, there were other veteran organizations, Dogs Helping Heroes, who's the organization that gave Jeremy a service dog, who had all of his medical health records, mental health records, went through a very stringent process. They too ended up testifying actually against Jeremy.
Are you kidding me?
No. They actually.
I'm telling you that I don't. The longer this goes on, the more enraged I become.
So
I've worked very, very hard over the course of the years to try to be more self-restrained and less volatile. I just want to let you both know that I'm being acutely challenged at the moment. So anyway, continue.
Holding strong, Chris. I'm doing the same. Actually, so Dogs Helping Heroes actually had the OIG come to it was called the Louisville Hero Run, and it's I don't know how long it is, a 5K maybe.
Yeah.
Run to raise money for local veteran organizations. Veterans Club was actually the first organization they donated money to. But then they were setting up booths, had veteran organizations come and set up booths, and Dogs Helping Heroes actually had the OIG come sit in their booth. He had a coffee cup that was actually a government super secret squirrel camera, and he had it sitting on the Dogs Helping Heroes table because Veterans Club's tent was right next to it. And they recorded. Now, their whole point was that they say Jeremy never has his dog, which I don't know what that has to do with this investigation, but Jeremy was there with his dog. So I was like, I'm so glad you all spent all of this money bringing this investigator into your tent and, watching us hang out with the other veterans and their dog. But you're surveilling veterans. You have this nonprofit that states that they are to, help veterans find freedom by the help of their service dog, and you have the...
Who the hell are they to question that? Who are they to question that? Have they sacrificed the way your husband did?
No.
Did they almost die in combat? Did they wake up every morning with nightmares and all of the torments that he suffered from? Who the hell are they to be questioning him about his service dog?
They really missed the mark, because I would say, if I was Dogs Helping Heroes, Cassie, the director, if I was her, I would say, well, maybe Jeremy is doing better because he has a dog from us. Hello.
Yeah.
But anyway, all that to say is that, and then there, another podcaster that, had a lot of jealousy issues. So I think it kind of snowballed. So I think there was this very overzealous OIG that saw Jeremy as a feather in his cap. And interestingly enough, the day after Jeremy was sentenced, he won an award for his work on the case and was presented at the Kentucky Eastern District Federal Court with his nice framed piece of paper on the work that he did.
He was awarded for persecuting a hero.
Yes.
An American hero. He was a government bureaucrat who's never accomplished one meaningful thing in his entire life.
Chris, get this. He's a veteran.
My gosh.
VA OIG.
That is sick.
Okay,
that is absolutely sick.
That makes it even more reprehensible.
Do you have any idea as to whether any of the people connected to Jeremy's prosecution have been investigated by the new administration? I know Cash has just been in for like 2 or 3 days.
Well, right. So we are very grateful about the new administration. I have been sending letters, emailing, putting on, the contact us, online. I've really been reaching out, just trying to get this case awareness about his case. We haven't heard back anything yet from them, and I do totally respect that they're coming in to a crap show. They're trying to clean up, and
take some time. Yeah.
And it will take some time. I do think that it's going to come to their attention eventually.
Well, it should. Erin, do you know do you remember the name of the lead OIG investigator, the first and last name?
Yeah, Remington Schilling. He's out of the Nashville office. Yeah.
What's the name?
Remington Schilling.
Remington Schilling.
Yeah.
And do you remember the name of the judge who presided over the case?
Yes. So I will say Judge Van Tatenhove was an excellent judge. I have a lot of respect for him. Very interesting at sentencing. We thought sentencing would be kind of like you go in, you find out, you leave. Sentencing was 3.5 hours. And, one thing that we learned through this. So I think what's important for the audience to know is that when you get in, you said it, Chris, if you're in the crosshairs of the government, they have unlimited resources. They protect themselves, so they are able to lie without any kind of repercussion. And so, but I think what's notable about Jeremy is that he did not take a plea. He was never going to admit that he did something that he didn't do, and he chose to go to trial. Now, the feds have a 99% conviction rate, mostly because they get their plea deals, because they scare you to death. They wear you down. They say, well, if you plea, you'll get less of a sentence. I can't imagine how many innocent people are in prison, or how many people are in prison that it could have been an administrative route, right? Just like Jeremy's case, the VA could have taken an administrative route to say, Jeremy, you're volunteering a lot. We think maybe you're better. We're going to propose to change your benefit or decrease your benefit. But they didn't do that.
Right.
And I think it was this OIG. I think it was, Mr. Schilling that just saw a big fish, really.
Killing the shill.
And just thought, I'm going to win an award on this one. And
it's amazing, Erin. It reminds me of what Aristotle said, that, power is a beast and can corrupt the hearts and minds of even the best of men. And I'll tell you, there was probably a time when Schilling was a fundamentally decent person. I mean, I don't know if he was a combat veteran, but he served in the military. And power and government bureaucracy corrupted his heart and his spirit. And that is the only inference you can make, because there is no way that any decent human being, understanding the full facts and circumstances of this case, could have possibly acted that way.
I think he deserves prayer. God calls us to pray for our enemies. And I think ultimately it's so sad that he would move away from, the brotherhood. And, and I get it. Like if Jeremy had been rolling in a wheelchair and claiming to be unable to walk and then was seen running a marathon,
Sure.
yeah, that there's an issue.
Absolutely.
But there is no VA policy against volunteerism. At trial, Schilling testified when asked by the defense, would Jeremy have ever gotten any documentation that says his volunteerism was an issue? And Schilling said no. He also testified that had Jeremy paid himself, so the kind of disability that Jeremy has, and this is public now, is he was what we call IU and P&T, so individual unemployability and permanent and total disability. And underneath that, you actually can earn, similarly like the Social Security, up to the poverty level. So you can earn a little bit, right? Well, on the stand, the investigator, Schilling, stated that had Jeremy paid himself from Veterans Club up to what he considered the poverty level of $35,000 in Kentucky for a family, if Jeremy had paid himself from Veterans Club, we wouldn't be here today.
So you're saying that if Jeremy, so Jeremy,
what kind of logic is that?
I mean,
it blows my mind. That's why that quote stays burned into my brain
because he didn't have the same kind of mentality as this warped man, apparently.
No. And so that was kind of like his argument. Like if Jeremy had been paid, and he tried to, basically all they did during trial was say Jeremy was a liar. Jeremy's a liar. He's a liar. He's a liar. He's a liar. And he was never charged with false statements. And believe me, the government did not do him a favor by not charging him with false statements. If they could have, they would have. But, the prosecutor, James Chapman, or assistant U.S. attorney, but prosecutor is the easier term here, he knew his audience. His audience was a jury. And now the jury was also stacked. So the jury had predominantly government employees, people who worked for state government, federal government. I think there was an attorney's wife. Interestingly enough, there was a juror who works for planning and zoning in our hometown who knew one of the witnesses and was still on the jury. When the jury went out to deliberate, they went out at Friday at 4:30. They were gone for about an hour. They came back. They said guilty.
Yeah. And let me say, along the lines of having a stacked jury there, Erin, as a lawyer, I can tell you that in federal court, unlike in most state courts, the lawyers are given very, very little latitude when it comes to examining the backgrounds or the prejudices or the dispositions of prospective jurors. They're not really allowed to delve deeply into that to absolutely ensure that they get a fair and impartial jury. It's very limited, and usually, ultimately, the judge, if you do try to disqualify a juror that you don't want, ultimately the judge will generally deny it. Because it's very hard in federal court to get a jury that is fair to the defense. I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah. And, going back to the judge, again, I do think that we were really blessed to have the judge we have. And it was very interesting at sentencing. So Chris, you might know this, but when someone goes to be sentenced, whether they plead or gone to trial, there is this unspoken expectation that a defendant admit his wrongdoing or her wrongdoing. You have to get up there. You have to say, I'm so sorry. I did this thing, and hope that makes your sentence less. Like, this is what we were told. You got to get up there, Jeremy. You got to admit something because they could make your sentence worse if you don't. And again, Jeremy said, I will not admit to something I didn't do. If my sentence is worse because I don't do that, then that's on me, not you. But my integrity does not allow me to do that. And I'm not knocking anybody that does feel pressured into doing that, because I can tell you this has been horrible. It is so much pressure. It is very, very scary to navigate a relationship with the feds like this. But Jeremy gets up and he gives his allocution statement to the judge, which is where you just kind of talk about, he talked about his childhood, which, he did experience neglect, abuse, and then a little bit of his military service, but mostly his why for what he did with Veterans Club, and just, really just in general in the community. And he told the judge, he said, I do not regret anything that I've done, and I won't stop. When I'm out, I will continue to serve my community. Number one, I think that really shows the heart of my husband, that no matter what, he will continue to love people despite the Perrys and the Schillings and the Cassies and the Dave Willis and all of these people, Ronnie Knuckles, these people that were friends to him that ended up testifying against him. He will love them anyway. And when he was done, that judge looked at him and said, I don't think you're a fraudster. He said, but I am duty sworn to pass a sentence because of a jury. And I respect the judge for that. I really do. I mean, I respect that he upholds the Constitution. He didn't have a say in what a jury was going to come back and do. And, if anybody that's navigated the legal system, you never know what a jury's going to do. I mean, you really don't. That every attorney we've talked to has said, you never know what a jury's going to do. And the judge, I will say, he varied his sentence as much as he possibly could. He really did, because the prosecutor was gunning for a whole lot more. And the prosecutor and Schilling did not look pleased when they left sentencing, which boggled my mind. I'm like, you got your guilty verdict here. Why do you want to continue to silence Jeremy so much?
I wonder if this particular prosecutor is going to be as enthusiastic about going after the grifters who have stolen billions and billions of dollars of taxpayer money, enriched themselves to the tune of tens of millions of dollars, if not more. I wonder if she's going to be as excited about prosecuting them as she was about prosecuting a decorated combat veteran who volunteered his time for a noble cause. I'm curious about that.
Well, we shall see. I sure hope that she gets fired long before she gets to prosecute anybody else.
Well, the prosecutor on the case is James Chapman. So
he,
yeah. I mean, I don't know, past administration.
Yeah. Look, who are we?
Exactly. Don't judge.
Yeah, so James Chapman is the AUSA on the case. Yeah, he's just ruthless. He's like a little robot. I will say during trial, there was one day that was not going his way. And, and that was what really shocked us about the trial, because I do feel like Jeremy's team proved reasonable doubt. Like, we know the truth, but the point of a trial is to prove reasonable doubt. I do think they did that. But when you're looking at a federal jury, one that's stacked the way that it was with the type of folks, they work in government, not all of them, some of them, you're trying to get people to understand VA policy, Social Security policy, nonprofit policy in a week. And I will tell you, most veterans can't even figure out VA policy in their lifetime.
Right.
And so, but there was one day he had a gray suit on and he was sweating so much that he sweated right through that gray suit and like this, trying to keep his arms down. And, I had to take my wins where I could get them. And so
that's right.
I really enjoyed watching him sweat that day. But yeah, there was just a lot of problems, with the trial. The VA psychologist, when they had her on the stand, her name's Dr. Sophia Marzano with the Louisville VA. We came to find out that the investigator sat outside the door, listened to Jeremy's exam.
That's so disgusting.
She testified that she was very nervous because of her interactions with the investigator prior to the exam. And so as a clinician, our ethics and our bias, that's very important stuff to pay attention to. And so if you know that you have bias, if you know your ethics are compromised, it is the ethical thing to defer to a colleague and say, I don't think that I can do this. Now, she didn't do that. Kind of going back to what I was saying as far as veterans getting care at the VA. Well, it's not private. You're talking to a government agent.
Yeah.
And so how are we supposed to help veterans, especially with their mental health issues, if they know that what they talk to their therapist is really a government agent and will read their notes on a federal witness stand if you find yourself in that situation? It was hard.
Absolutely sick. It doesn't sound like ethics was a predominant feature of any part of this case or this ordeal.
Not at all.
How is the Aaron? How is the nonprofit doing now? Is it still fun?
Well, I mean, that was the other thing. We have a director of operations. Jeremy did not do that part. Jeremy was, the face of it. It was kind of his story that started it and, his passion and his heart. But as far as we have a board of directors, we have a director of operations, organization is still functioning. And, that was what I was, they kept calling him the CEO at trial. And it's like, well, somebody has to be listed as the principal on adherence documentation. He's he's not the CEO of Humana. Like, no offense, right, to our nonprofit. He's not the CEO. I mean, I could be the CEO of my popcorn stand, really, if I wanted to be. So I think that was also another problem at the trial, that just the jury kept hearing liar and CEO, liar, CEO. But the organization is still functioning. It's still providing services. It's still helping the veteran community. We also help the first responder community and their families. So it's still functioning.
I'm excited to share a fantastic opportunity for State of Freedom listeners who are interested in investing in precious metals or even starting a home-based business in the precious metals industry. Metal Stacks is a precious metals collectors club where you can buy your metals at the best prices on the market, actual dealer cost. They are beating the big sites. They have no credit card fees and no minimums. If you're just interested in purchasing metals at a great price, visit metalstacks.com/dwalker. Get to shopping. That helps me out. I get the commission. You can also refer people to Metal Stacks for an additional income. If you're interested in learning about the referral business aspect of Metal Stacks, email me directly at danielle@freedomstate.us for more information.
What's the outlook, Erin? What's the status of his appeal? Are you guys appealing?
Absolutely appealing this. That's a process in itself. So we're working on the appeal, just praying for strength, praying for wisdom for his appellate attorney, just praying that as this navigates, we do know that God has a plan for this. We have faith in that. We know that God doesn't promise us every day will be easy. And I'm excited for when Jeremy's out and when he can talk to you guys again, because I don't know that when he will do 6 months of prison, 6 months of home confinement, and then a year of supervised release is his sentence right now. And there may be some restrictions on what he can say and talk about, but I know that you all will welcome him back on to just hear about, some of the real amazing things that God is doing in our life, during a very heartbreaking time.
Yeah.
You've talked a lot about your faith during the show today. And it sounds like without your faith, where would you be?
My heart breaks for anyone who is going through something like this or any other crisis that does not know Jesus. I will tell you that without him, we would not have gotten through this. I don't know what it would look like if it weren't for our faith. Our faith has allowed us to be surrounded by other Christians, our Christian family and friends. And, God comforts us through others. And we have been so supported. The support and, that's something that really is a testament to Jeremy and his heart and what people see with this injustice is the amount of support that we have gotten, that he has gotten, the people rallying around us. People don't come around people and rally that way. People aren't dumb. They know, they have an instinct. Now they might be blinded by jealousy in some cases, right? But
sure.
You don't have that many people. I'll tell you, when he went to sentencing, 120 or more supporters showed up at sentencing on a Monday afternoon.
Wow.
Filled the court room and had to open up a second room and then live feed the sentencing into that room. And the prosecutor, he calls Jeremy, a deceiver and a liar. And, I don't think that many people would show up on a Monday afternoon to a sentencing for someone that they thought was a deceiver and a liar.
You're so right. You're so right. How are you holding up, Erin? How's your family doing?
Honestly, I just wake up heartbroken every day. God does not let me stay bitter long. I kind of am enmeshed between my clinical mind and my faith. And so, I allow myself to feel. I cry every day. I miss my husband terribly. It's an injustice. The conditions of the prison are terrible. We've had terrible rain here in Kentucky, and the roof is terrible at this prison, and the rain just comes in. There's black mold.
God.
There's no hot water. The food portions are probably the size that you would feed like an elementary school person. So he's lost a lot of weight. It's just really, really hard. I do get to visit him on the weekends. So I drive the hours there. I spend a lot of time on the road because I want to see him as much as I can. So I'm allowed to see him on Saturdays and Sundays. And that gets us through. We can pray together. We get to just be together. And, one of the blessings, to think about is that honestly, I don't know how long, if ever, we've sat that long together without our phones in our hand, because we're really to our phones, right, as a society, and you can't take your phone or anything in the prison. And so there's been such sweet moments between us where we just get to sit and talk, and that's so beautiful, and that's where we find those God moments.
Yeah. How do you, I didn't live through this, obviously, but 3 words come to my mind when I think about the whole characterization of everything that you've described and been through: jealousy, vengeance, and unaccountable bureaucracy.
Mm.
Those are the 3 things that come to my mind. And this is a terrible, terrible insult to justice. It truly is. How has this changed the way you look at the government and more specifically the justice system in America?
Well, I can't say that I ever really had a lot of faith in the justice system to begin with. I really am heartbroken by the lack of integrity, the lies, and the way that our government protects itself from being able to lie and get away with it. Like, you can have prosecutorial misconduct, but 1976, the Supreme Court determined that you cannot hold a prosecutor accountable for their misconduct. It
Very,
gives them
very difficult
free
to do.
reign to do and say whatever they want. Now, at the end of the day, that's between them and God, ultimately. And I would not want to see that judgment.
Mm-hmm.
They have an opportunity to repent, right? If that's kind of how they've operated. But, it's just really, disappointing that, the government it can lie, it can say whatever it wants. There's no repercussions for it. I pray that, with the new administration, you keep hearing about kind of this 2-tier justice system that they're doing away with, that maybe some changes will come of that. And I will tell you that this has not squashed our fire for advocacy. It has only opened the door for more. Historically, we've been very much veterans, their families, and first responders. But now the justice impacted, it's going to be a huge advocacy for us. And, I'm excited about what is on the other side of this. We're in the fiery furnace and it's hot and I'm ready to get out. But I feel like this furnace is forging us in a way that, they better watch out when we, catch our footing and Jeremy's home and we can start advocating for others again. We will. And again, that is one of the things that makes my husband so remarkable, is that despite all of this and the hurt, especially the hurt from these other local people that we did life with, that's our motto: do life with people.
Yeah.
That hurt, not the people we don't know that just pop off on social media, but
friends, supposedly.
Heart for service.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, the consolation in all of this and the inspiration to me is that everything that they've done to you, everything that they put you and your family through, one thing that they have not been able to take away from Jeremy is his hope. And hope is a good thing. Hope may be the best thing we can ever have. And they have failed to kill his hope. Yeah. And that is why he's going to end up coming back stronger than ever, because they wanted to break him and they were unable to break him. And that is what I would carry with me if I were you as well.
I think stronger and louder, stronger and louder,
baby.
Come back to bite them, and that. Yeah. So,
Erin, is there any way that our listeners can support Jeremy or your family? Anything that they can do if they hear this story and it touches them and they say, what in the world can I do to support this family?
Yes. Number one, pray. Pray for strength. Again, pray for, our appeal, his appeal. Pray for the judges that will look at that appeal, that they see the injustice. So, writing letters, don't underestimate the power. If that could tell anybody, do not underestimate the power of your voice or your pen or your keyboard, right? Letters, writing letters, letting, this administration know the louder that we are, it'll start to come to the surface for them and they'll see that. So writing letters would be.
You mean letters to the Justice Department?
Yeah, to your senators, to your Justice Department, to anybody in your network that you think has a connection. Just, keeping the story elevated so that we can get the right eyes on it. And then, we do have a spot fundraiser. This has, as you can imagine, fighting the feds has been extremely financially destructive and continues to be in a lot of different ways with them wanting to seize assets. Restitution, they're currently double dipping with restitution. The government has one order of a certain amount, but the VA is already taking a certain amount. So that is really hard to navigate. But yeah, I just think that, continued prayers for Jeremy, for his strength, for the right eyes to see this, for justice to be served.
Yeah. Amen. Well, we will certainly be praying for you, Erin, for your strength. I know that you're a bright light for Jeremy, and I know that he's a bright light in a very dark place right now. It's incredible. I know he's got so many testimonies already of the way the Lord's using him, and lives are being changed wherever he is, because that's who he is.
Yeah.
Thank you for being with us today. It's been a real privilege, and keep in touch.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Danielle.
Thank you, honey.
Thanks for joining us today on the State of Freedom. Be sure and check out the show notes for this episode. You can always go there and find the calls to action and resources mentioned in the show, and you can find out more information about our advertisers there as well. If you want to learn more about us or support our work, visit freedomstate.us. To get involved with Louisiana Citizen Advocacy Group, visit lacag.org. We'll see you next time. God bless.